Hi, my name is Andrew Wells with the Executive Lines, Living Life on Purpose.
And I'm Matt Wilson, and the goal of this show is for you to be encouraged as you hear the stories of challenges and obstacles that successful people have faced, how their spirituality plays a role, and how they've been able to overcome these things.
And so we're sitting here with Brian Schubert. He is the owner of the Chick-fil-a in McCalla and the former Chick-fil-a in the infamous South Side 5 Points. He graduated from the University of Tennessee with a landscape architecture degree. His dream was to become to run and manage many golf courses and just hang out with all the big guys. But after a few days on the green, he realized that was not what he wanted to do. So he did what a lot of us want to do when we don't want to do something. He went to Hawaii. And so he stayed there for about a year, and after enjoying the surfs, he came back and started working for a large windows and doors company that was working for builders, and then started his own custom door and window supply company. He did extremely well with his own business, but unfortunately for a lot of us, 2007 was a hard year. So he was left holding the invoices for a few home builders, and so after closing up shop, he decided he needed to do something different. So with that, that's how we started Chick-fil-a. He also has a ministry that supports special needs families or families that have children with special needs called Addie's Army. He resides in Birmingham with his wife, Chrissy, and his 3 children, Addie, Camden, and Bailey. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you guys for having me.
So tell us about, you went to Hawaii.
Yes. So that came about, I went there, I still remember the date, June 17th of 2001. It was about a year and a half after I graduated from Tennessee in August of 99. And when I took the first job I had, I worked for a landscaping company that, basically did lawn services for high-end homes. And that lasted for about 3 months, getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and getting home at 9 o'clock at night every day, but Sunday was just like, this is not something I want to do for the rest of my life. And so then I still thought I needed to pursue something in a career, but I was like this, whether it's landscape or not. I worked for Campbell's Soup for about a year. It was actually right at a year, and selling into Winn-Dixie, Kroger, Publix, and realized, okay, I don't want to sell into grocery stores my entire life. So I had a territory in North Georgia, and one day I had been thinking about it for a while. Because I'd always had a dream to live in Hawaii, one to visit. Then I was like, you know what, I really want to live there. And I had a lot of people tell me that I'm foolish, just go there for a couple weeks, get out of your system. But I was like, no, this is what I'm feeling, and I saved money. And then so when I met with my territory manager in March of 2001, because I would see her once every 4 to 6 weeks, I told her, I was like, I'm packing up. I got 4 bags and a set of golf clubs, and I'm moving to Maui, and I'm going to figure it out. So I had no job, no car, no place to live, and I moved on June 17th and ended up having a really awesome time and, meeting people that I probably would have never met, and living there for a year, and I went and saw the entire, all 8 islands during that year and had the time of my life. So it was just a dream of mine that I knew that I had to get out of my system. I wasn't married, didn't have kids, no mortgage. So I was like, it's now or never. And don't be 50 years old one day and say, what if I'd gone? And so I don't regret it for one bit.
Well, I think that, number one, I only did landscaping for a couple weeks while I was in college. And so you beat me by, gone for several months. But it's extremely hard work. I like the fact that I could get a tan and get exercise at the same time, but other than that, it was pretty miserable.
Yeah, I chose. Well, I did golf courses during the summer months during my college years, and would be working 80 hours a week, and it was kind of the same thing. You got a nice tan, you lost weight, and then I got to play golf just about every day. So I had some really bad reasons of why I was doing what I was doing.
Right.
But I enjoyed it.
Right.
And so it was more than 3 months in total, but 3 months after I got out of school.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I think that, the different roles that we have throughout our lifetime and throughout our career, could always give us perspective for the future. And, no matter what we're going through, positive or negative, to be able to draw back on those experiences. I too stocked some shelves at Kroger's.
Yeah.
Back when I was in college and really even in high school. And, those were learning experiences. Those were roles that I had that I'm thankful that I don't have today.
Yeah.
But, I think that different types of, positions or, different types of jobs, I mean, you've got to have a tough job to appreciate it when you've got a job that you really enjoy.
Yeah.
And, so without the bad, you can't appreciate the good. But, with that, you went from, various roles to, obviously the custom windows and doors. And then from that, transitioning into Chick-fil-A that you're in now. Tell us a little bit about that. How did you get started with Chick-fil-A?
Okay.
And give us a little bit of history there.
So I guess I'll back up how the Chick-fil-A story began in Christmas of '07. I think that's right. It may be '08. I think I have my timeline right. My brother gave me a book of Truett's called Eat More Chicken, Inspire More People. I read it in a couple of days, and I was flying up to Memphis, Tennessee for a good college friend of mine's wedding, and I was staying with one of my dear friends from college, and it was just coincidence. It was, God's timing. But I had finished the book on my way up on my flight, and Clark had about 500 Chick-fil-A. In those days, they called them BOGs, Be Our Guest cards, and having 500 versus 2 is one thing, and so of course I thought he had stolen them or whatever. But I asked him. I said, Clark, I was like, how did you get so many? And he told me, he said, well, Grant, which is his brother-in-law, and I've known Clark, all through these years when we were in college together and going to Memphis. 9 times out of 10 I visited him, and so by proxy I would see Grant, his brother-in-law. He's like, well, he has one outside of Memphis, or Chick-fil-A outside of Memphis, and he's like, you really need to, tell him or ask him and pick his brain about the business. And I was like, well, that's great and all. And at that time, I was having a lot of troubles with my window and doors from one builder in particular that hung me high and dry for an invoice. But I was like, I have no plan to ever, own a restaurant business, let alone fast food. And then it just dawned on me when I got back to Florida in the Panhandle. I started looking at Chick-fil-A now from a business perspective rather than just going there ordering number one, because I didn't think they had anything else but number one. But I was so intrigued, and I'd been going to Chick-fil-A at that time for 20, 25 years, and I just never looked at it from a business perspective. But when I started traveling to all the ones in the Panhandle, in Fort Walton, Gulf Breeze, Pensacola, I just noticed they have great people. They're all clean. I was like, they're efficient. And it's just a higher class of fast food. And so I did start picking Grant's brain, and I remember very clearly the first time I talked to him. This would have probably been sometime in the spring of '08. He said, well, you got to have perseverance and patience and persistence. And I said, well, I've got all but patience. And so I told him, I said I was going to apply for it, and I did. And so I applied, and I was actually got through the first stage of it, where they weed out like 80-90%. And so they gave me an application to fill out to become a franchise owner, and I filled that out. And during this time, so I guess that's 4 or 5 months of talking with Grant, he was like, there's only at that time, and it's more now, but I think it was 15 to 20,000 applicants, and they select 40 to 50 years. So the percentage is very low, and it's stacked against you. I kind of had in my mind that I was going to be told no. And so I was like, my plan B is I'm going to go work for Chick-fil-A if I'm told no. And I remember Grant telling me, don't do it. That's actually probably going to hurt your cause. But there was just something telling me that you're probably going to be told no, don't give up, and go work for one. And if Grant ever watches this, I wasn't heeding his advice to go on to work for one. And so I was told no in August of '08. And it was a lot of times, like for me, when I was told no in sales, it was a disappointment. But I'd learned that I was told 99 times, but if you get the one yes, then that's, you're fighting through that battle. And so I think because I prepared to be told no for 2 months, that it didn't sting as bad. My really, when I was officially told no by email, I was like, okay, what are you going to do next to make sure you pursue this dream? Because I did at that point, after talking with him, I realized like, this is what I want. I see Chick-fil-A from a different perspective rather than just as a customer. I'm seeing it from a business opportunity. And so I went and applied at where I lived in the Panhandle. There was one to the west that was 20 miles and another one to 20 miles. Well, the way I picked the one in Panama City Beach was where my window and door business was. It was only 10 or 12 miles from my office. And so that's why I chose the Panama City Beach one. I went and applied, and I wasn't even sure what an owner-operator was in Chick-fil-A's eyes at the time. I applied, they hired me, and it was in September of '08, and I started working every position. And I remember calling Chick-fil-A back, their HR department, and telling them, hey, I'm working for you guys now. And they said, okay, well, great. Just call us back in 4 months. And I think it was really HR pushing me, like, we're not even going to be talking to you. So fast forward, I worked for about 4 months of that time, called back, and I had not met the operator because he has three. He's one of the, probably, I think, 10 to 15 guys in the whole chain that has three. Walt Rose is his name. But when I called back HR in January of '09, they were like, well, your application's dead in the water. And that was kind of a blow because I was like, well, man, I've been working for 4 months and no one's even noticed it. I'm working 80 hours a week. I'm still doing my window and door business. And so that's when I went to Walt, and actually his wife was, I met her first. And so she said, well, I'll have Walt come in the next day you work. And so this was January of '09, and I told Walt, I said, hey, I've been here for 4 months. And rightfully, I didn't get to see him because I usually worked at nights because I was doing my window and door business. And I remember him saying, because at that time he'd been an operator, and he still is for about 30 years. He said, in my 30 years, I think I've had 500 folks tell me that they want to be an operator, and I've probably had about 5 to 8 that have made it. And he's like, so good luck. And it's kind of what, and so
That doesn't sting at all, does it?
well, it didn't bother me. It actually inspired me more because I was like, okay, well, whether it's 5, whether it's 8, I was like, I'm gonna be number 6 or number 9, whatever it is. And because at the 4 months that I had been I'd been at his store, I'd done not every position yet, but I'd started off filleting chicken. I was, in the back of the house on boards, then I was on headset for drive-through. And so I was seeing a lot of the business, but for me, what I saw was the opportunity, and I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. Even though I was 33 years old and, I was inside fast food, I was the low man on the totem pole. I was definitely the old man. And so I saw the big picture in all of it. And so building a relationship with Walt, he told me, he said, when my business consultant, which is basically the liaison for Chick-fil-A, they come down and they're just, essentially making sure you're not open on a Sunday, you're sticking to the menu, and they're just seeing what you need help in the business. He said, my business consultant is coming down, and this is your one shot. And because my application was still dead in the water because it had been, I guess, 6 to 8 months that they had still told me no, and they wait for 2 years to even pull it if they do pull it. And so his business consultant came down, Kim Cartrell, who I'm forever grateful for. It was right after the spicy sandwich got launched. I remember that. In June of 2009, or yes, it would have been June of 2009. And I'm sorry, was it? Gosh, I'm getting my dates. It's either 09 or 10, but it was 10. It was 10. And so we ended up talking in his restaurant for about 2.5 hours. And she said, I think that we've made a mistake, and I think that there's something here to where I believe in you. And she went back and she said, just call me, once a month, every 6 weeks or whatever, and I'll kind of tell you, where you are in the process. And I didn't understand what she meant by the process, but I was at the very beginning stages of it, and so she went back and I guess kind of stood on a table and said, "Hey, I think we need to take a look at this person." And one thing led to another, and I went through the process. They call it the Chick-fil-A process. It's the joke is it's easier to get into the CIA than the CFA, which is there's some truth to that, I think. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up getting selected. There's a lot in between. February 14th of 2011, so just over 7 years ago. And but I ended up working for Walt for about 18, 20 months. And by the time I left, I had worked every position. I didn't understand everything on the back end from a financial standpoint, but I'd studied the P&L. I understood what it was to fillet chicken. I understood the headset. So that's a condensed version, even though that seems long-winded. But yeah, so February of 2011 was when I officially got selected.
So that's that's the interesting part about being an entrepreneur is that we're told no all the time.
Right.
And somehow we have to continue to persist and somehow believe that there is a yes at the end of all those no's.
Yeah.
And it's so hard to not lose heart during all the no's.
Right.
Because it stings, and
Yeah.
sometimes it keeps stinging.
Yeah.
And then you have hope, and then it stings some more. And then you have hope again. Maybe this time it's different, but then you find out it's not.
Yeah.
You went. So you had the one big sting was you get a contractor or a builder that says, "I'm sorry, I can't pay the bill."
Right.
Whether he's telling you that over the phone or lack of not taking the phone calls, one of the two, right?
Well, he was committing fraud, this particular one. To be
Okay,
honest.
so that's even worse.
and he's still in jail. But yeah, I mean, that was that for me. That was my turning point.
See, that's outside of your control too.
It is.
See, we want to believe that if we work hard, if we're persistent, if we want all these things, that these things, like good things happen. But unfortunately, there's stuff that happen outside of our control that we have to always pivot and adjust. Yeah. And so you did that. Like you get that first big hit, then you have to decide because of something that was outside of your control. I mean, you had the economics, and then you had this builder.
Right.
So you have two major things outside your control. You're doing everything you can to make it work, but it doesn't matter how many right moves you make.
Right.
Sometimes it's just not going to work. And that's sometimes the frustrating part about being an entrepreneur. But then after that, you go and say, well, surely, I'm successful. I mean, Chick-fil-A should want someone like me to be able to run something, and then
Right.
say no.
Right.
And then they kind of treat you like as if you're just like everybody else. And then you have to go in and kind of
Prove
swallow your
yourself.
pride
Yeah.
a little bit. And then you're not only swallowing your pride. So in your position, you're not only swallowing your pride. You're a man who was running a company who's now behind the scenes cooking chicken.
Right.
And so you have to do that. It's, at least for me, it'd be like, yeah,
Humbling.
it's a little humbling.
It is
How'd you do
humbling.
that?
It is humbling. But I look back at two things in that process. So when I was hung out high to dry on the invoice, I was still running the business, but
Yeah.
there were moments where when it's that big of a bill, one, I'm sucking wind because I'm like, gosh, I have 3 kids and they were a lot younger at the time. I'm working 80 hours a week with Chick-fil-A, but what I do remember on my drives home when I would be leaving Chick-fil-A at 11 or 12 o'clock at night, driving back home to start the process over again, go to my window and door business at 7 o'clock in the morning. I remember, on the 331, because it's basically, it's a 2-lane road, or was a 2-lane road. Nothing's out there. But I remember hearing like this, by you getting hung high and dry for this invoice, this really is a blessing long term if you do get Chick-fil-A. And that's how I kept looking. I was like, this was the catalyst to make me start looking elsewhere. And so that was what kept me perspective of like, okay, this is not fun to deal with, of basically trying to come up with money for an invoice, because I still had to order windows for other contractors and builders. And then, but, at 33, working, at $8 an hour at night, and like I said, I was the old man on the crew. I mean, it was mostly between 16 and 22. I really was inspired by, it made me see like, okay, I'm going to be able to, hopefully one day if I get one, I'm working with young kids and I can mold them, teach them life lessons, but it also I wouldn't want it any other way. I was glad actually that Chick-fil-A had told me no, because it forced me to go work for them in every position in there now. Now that I run a franchise and I have 77 employees right now, all of them, no matter what position they're in, I've done that position and I understand how difficult it is. Where I don't know if I would have been as appreciative if I had been told yes the first go around and I just all of a sudden got a franchise. I wouldn't have understood the sweat equity that goes into everything that they do. And so to me, yeah, there were a lot of valleys in those days, but looking back at it now, I mean, what Matt was saying earlier about jobs that you had earlier, I mean, when I drive on 280 and I see, like this time of the year, they're switching out the winter flowers and starting to put in the spring. Well, I did that, when I was right after college, and I was a lot younger, and I remember my back always hurting, my kneecap always hurting. So it gives me perspective of what I've been there before. Every single one of those difficult jobs and back-breaking jobs has helped me, and it gives me a better perspective. So I'm glad I was told no. It inspired me because I was like, okay, I've been told no, and this is my dream, this is my goal, and I'm like, how many no's will I get? Hopefully not too many, but you just got to keep persistent and pursuing it if you're passionate about it.
Yeah.
I think that's, that a very good lesson too, that, if you stay positive, if you stay persistent, if you do your best in whatever role you're in, at whatever specific time, because God's plan is always greater than our plan.
Right.
And He is not surprised by any situation that we end up in.
Right.
But we get surprised. We get blindsided. So, He realized that, you needed to be in all those situations to now, basically prepare you. Number one, you had to work hard at every single one of those positions in order to stand out for Kim to say, you know what? You are different than the 500 people that have worked at his store that have said that they want to do it. You are one of those 5 to 8 that will make it. And but at the same time, it doesn't make the situation easy that you're walking through.
Right.
But if you realize that God could be using it for something later on, and you realize that it could be preparation. I've been telling people a lot lately in conversations that, we've often got to look and ask what God is trying to do instead of why is God doing this to us? Because through the struggles that we face, that's really where He can teach us the most. Because, Pastor Jensen Franklin said on Wednesday night, that you've got to have resistance in order to, have growth. You've got to have struggle in order to, get the best out of you. But, so God was not only preparing you from a business standpoint, but also He was giving you some challenges in, your business life that were going to prepare you for, challenges where you were going to have perseverance. So with Addie's Army, that was something that started as you moved to Birmingham. Tell us about that and how your family has faced those challenges and how y'all have turned that pain into your purpose.
Sure. So when we moved up to Birmingham in June of 2011, like I said, I got selected in February 2011, but we were, I had to go through the training up at corporate for 7 weeks, and then I was getting done with the window and door business and shutting that down. So we moved up here. The 5 Point store was, prolonged permitting, and there was just a lot of stuff that delayed it, which was good in the sense that it gave me time to spend time with Chrissy and the kids, because for the previous 20 months or 2 years, I guess, I was just so busy and with the windows and doors and Chick-fil-A and dealing with that Addie was diagnosed 2 weeks from the time we got here officially with autism, and it was kind of a stamp of approval for my wife, because she had felt that burden for about 6 months, and I've kind of it's not that I didn't believe it, but I just kept thinking, okay, she's just going through a phase. But the 3-4 months that I had before we opened the store, I guess 3 months, it gave me perspective of like, holy cow, I've missed a lot with what Addie's going through and what Chrissy had been going through. And so That was a blow. We didn't know what autism was. We didn't know what the journey was going to look like. I'd worked with special needs kids before in my high school days, but we just weren't prepared for it. And so September of 2011, the store opens, and just like any business, you got to put in the sweat equity now as an owner and getting your people in place, the procedures, the policies, all that kind of stuff in place. And so once again, now I'm working 80 hours a week, and a lot of people think, okay, well now you have the business, and you're making all this money. Well, that wasn't the case. I was paying Chick-fil-A to have a franchise. I would have been better off just hiring myself as a cashier. And so Addie, and back on the why too, like we had no reason in the what, like why are we going to Birmingham? I mean, I thought like, okay, well we're going to Birmingham because this is the first opportunity with Chick-fil-A. If you're going to get in Chick-fil-A, you got to take it. And we did, because we had no family here, no friends. I'd only been to Birmingham 2 times for Tennessee-Alabama game in '95 and a wedding a few years before. And so I could see now, looking back, God directing us to Birmingham because there was a special needs or autism private school that availability or that opportunity wasn't really down in the Panhandle at that time. There is one now, but when we were there, that wasn't there. So we put Addie into a private school here, and it was also something we didn't budget. So you couple with not making money with your franchise, and now you have a new $25,000 bill just for a school. That didn't count the medical, that didn't count the times that Chrissy was going all throughout the country, and so one thing, like you think that okay, you've gone through the struggle of being told no, you've waited 2 years, and now like you feel like okay, everything is going to be in place. Well, to be honest with you, from the time I started with Chick-fil-A, really the first year to year and a half, 18 months when I was at 5 Points, I would have been better off still staying with windows and doors. And I contemplated, I'm like, what is going on here? And I'd been sued by employees, I'd been sued by customers. Like I said, we weren't making money. I've got a daughter now that has autism that it's showing itself, and where she was ripping out her hair, biting herself, going to bed at 10 o'clock, being up at midnight, and that was for 10 months straight. And then I've got, our oldest one, Bailey, he was 13 or 14, I guess, at the time. He didn't like being here because he had left his friends. And so it was a real struggle. And I remember a lot of days going on 280, I'm like, why am I here? I couldn't get any respite, at my store with all the problems I was having. And then I would get home, and then it was like, here's Addie, because I don't know what to do. And my only piece was traffic on 280. I'm the only person I'm sure of in Birmingham that loved 280 traffic, because that was the only time I had peace. But so we go through all this, and then we're really struggling from a marital standpoint. When your finances are in dire straits, that causes more stress, and you keep getting all these things that like, hey, she needs this, this, and this, whether it's the therapy or the medical or a special diet. I mean, it kept all adding up. And when we finally were getting our feet under us at 5 Points, where we were at least making some money, but we were still spending more than what was coming in. Fast forward to April of, forgive me on my dates, it would have been 2013. Addie was 4, had just turned 4, and she had been at the private school now for 2 years. We kind of knew it was coming, that they were like, hey, she's going to have to go into a specialized class within this school, one-on-one. And I knew what that meant, and that meant tuition goes from $25,000 to $50,000, and we thought we were just digging ourselves out of everything. And when you hear that, and your wife is like, we got to figure out how to do it, I'm like, we can't. And we were, Chrissy and I were at the end of our rope from a marital standpoint, and there were times I'm like, I just need to pack my bags again and go to Hawaii, is what I was thinking. So we got through it, and really the way we were able to get through it was dear friends from Atlanta, or outside of Atlanta, where my wife and I are from, said, we're going to put together a fundraiser for you guys, for Addie, for the tuition, and we're hoping to raise $7,000. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, $7,000, 50,000. I was like, that's peanuts, but you know what? Beggars can't be choosers. And what had happened was in October of 2013, and this is how Addie's Army really started. They were able to, on October 6, 2013, I'll never forget the date, they ended up raising $30,000 in about 4 hours. And so when we drove back, Chris and I drove back with the kids from Atlanta back to Birmingham, don't think that I don't sneeze at 20,000, but we were so used to 25,000 a year plus all these other bills that coming up with 20,000, I'm like, well, I've already been doing it. So I was like, we'll be able to make it. But I remember driving back very clearly. I'm looking at my wife's in the passenger seat, Addie's behind me in her car seat, and then Camden and Bailey are back there. And I remember looking, and what I remember thinking was two things. One, I'm looking at my daughter, and I'm like, this wasn't just about her. I'm looking at Camden and Bailey because I'm like, what these people don't realize are friends and people we didn't know that donated. I was like, they're helping her brothers because Camden was told, yeah, you can't do baseball, you can't do taekwondo because it wasn't in the budget. And I was like, but really what you're doing is you're helping our marriage because it was the biggest monkey off of my back to where I could breathe again. And I just remember God just working with me on saying, you know what, you're going to start a nonprofit and you're going to bless other families the way you've been blessed, and you're going to call it Addie's Army. And and I told Chrissy that, and she said, I think that's awesome and we need to do it. I mean, she always had my back, always has my back. And so for the next couple of months, I'm now racking my brain, like, what is this organization going to look like? What are we going to do? And it was about 2 or 3 months after that event, our pastor had a sermon of, God may create pain in your life, but he does it for a purpose. So you need to turn your pain into purpose. And when he said that, for me, it was so simple. Like all the branches for Addie's Army represent something we struggle with, we hoped for, and or researched. And so the branches for Addie's Army were very simple. I sat down at North County Shelby Library and I started writing, okay, everything that's been painful from a dad's perspective is the financial part. And I was like, what have we tried to do for Addie that has been so costly? And there's a lot of stuff. And each branch represented that. And it's very tangible things that people can see to where, they know what their money's going to if they donate. And so that, for us, what I didn't realize even now, what's even bigger is, one, it's awesome helping families, but it also keeps the perspective of like what I deal with Addie, or it keeps me in perspective of what I'm dealing with Addie, because now, we are in a better place from a financial standpoint, but it also makes our problem look so much smaller because we deal with families all the time, meet them or talk to them through email or whatever it is. And even if you take away the financial part, I mean, as severe as Addie is, so many of these other families have children that are much more severe. So it makes my problem look smaller, which I never, beginning a nonprofit, my wife and I never thought, okay, well, this is just going to help us keep our perspective too. We, our goal is to help families. And so it's not just helping them, but it's also helping us understand that our problem's not that big. It's not as big as we make it. And so,
definitely an amazing family, an amazing story. Addie is just an amazing little girl. My daughter loves her, so we all love her. But they become friends, and it's awesome to see that bond. And but it's just such a great thing when we can walk through extremely difficult situations, but God can use it so that we can help somebody else walk through maybe an even tougher situation. And it changes our perspective. And so I'm thankful that you were able to share that stuff with us today. I know that there's so much more to this story, but we're at time. And so I definitely appreciate everybody watching today. If you want to learn more about Addie's Army, tell them how they can learn more about you.
Yeah, you can just go to the website addiesarmy.org. It's ADYS and then army.org, and everything is on there, what we do as an organization and who we help.
And so if you want to learn more about who we are, Executive Line. You can always check us out on our website, www.executiveline.com. And you can go, please like and share some of what we have to say or some of what we're doing here. So hopefully it encourages and inspires you guys as well. So turning pain into purpose. So also comment, forgot about that. Comment about how maybe you guys been able to turn pain into maybe a purpose. He was able to convert maybe just a couple dollars from some of you guys, and now there's a little bit of a multiplication effort. So how are you able to turn pain into purpose? Thank you guys for joining us today, and we'll see you guys next time in 2 weeks.